So it's my pleasure to introduce Vita Cruz, and I have a very, very brief introduction prepared, but I'm going to ask her to talk about herself, so I won't go on too long. Um, Vita is corporate counsel at Gearbox Entertainment Company, which is a Texas-based video game developer. She holds a Bachelor of Arts, a JD, and an MBA, all from the University of Miami. And Vita not only works in the game industry, but is also a gamer herself, which may be relevant to her professional journey. So we might talk a bit about that. So I'd like to start off by just asking you about yourself. So could you maybe describe your educational path? And in particular, could you talk about, sort of what led you to get a law degree and also what led you to get an MBA? And did you have any specific career goals in mind when you went the dual degree route?
Wait, what was the first one again? Tell me one more time.
First one is just like sort of open ended. Just kind of talk about your educational journey, I suppose. Like maybe like start out in like undergrad and kind of like what led you to law school? Why did you decide to get an MBA? Just sort of give us your biography, I suppose.
The lore, my lore.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna start. I just don't know if you guys can hear my cat. He seems to be having an episode. As long as you don't hear him, or if you do, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, your cat's not troubling us. You're all
Okay.
good.
All right. So if we go back into the years long ago, I was in undergrad and oh my God, I discovered League of Legends in undergrad, which was probably like the worst thing for me because I spent a lot I think I clocked in at like 1,000+ hours playing League. But that kind of like revitalized my love for games when I was in undergrad. And what led me to go to law school in the first place was that I used to cosplay. So I bring up League because I used to cosplay a lot of League of Legends characters. And wait, one sec. Okay, sorry, technical issues. So I used to cosplay a lot, and I would post pictures of myself online. I had a Facebook page, I had an Instagram page, and I was going to conventions in the area and all that. So then I noticed that people were resharing my pictures without my permission and all that. And that wasn't cool at all. They were just straight up reposting or impersonating me, which was really weird and off putting. So I basically vowed for that to not happen to others. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like that happening to other artists as well, because when you're in the cosplay community, you also get to meet a lot of cool people who do, actual fan art and other things, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. And yeah, I didn't like that at all, not one bit. So I went to law school in order to prevent that from happening and to try and help IP creators, intellectual property creators, with their intellectual property, which is their artwork, which is their photography, which is all that. So I really wanted to help creators in that way. And then when I got to law school, it was that first year that really, you just did it for me. I didn't like law school, I'll be honest. That first year was really brutal for me. I came from no experience of law. I'm the first in my family to graduate any kind of undergrad or graduate program. So not never had a lawyer in the family, had no idea what it was like. And yeah, so that's what led me to want to check out other options, and other options came in the form of business. At the University of Miami, we had what's called the Launchpad, and I had a mentor there who showed me this program and basically told me, hey, if you want to work as a venture consultant, we're really open ears. So I was like, that sounds awesome. I get to help entrepreneurs with their ideas. And then that led me down the path of, okay, I really like business. So what can I get a degree in business? But I don't want to drop law school just yet. So I decided to do the MBA at the same time, and I got the MBA and the law degree. And I really, really, really loved the MBA program. I had a concentration in marketing, which is something that I really enjoy. I had my own company for a while doing social media marketing for different people and companies and all that. So I got to really explore that area. And I don't know if this is a spoiler for your next question, Camden, but like that business experience has helped me so much going in house straight out of law school, because it gave me the basis and the foundation for having to work at a corporation. At the end of the day, a video game studio is a business just like any other. So having that experience with how a company works and then having the legal expertise to back it up was so helpful in being in-house counsel for a video game studio. So I guess that kind of sums up my lore in terms of schooling.
That does lead very directly to my next question, which is, could you just talk about, I guess it's kind of a two-part question, but could you talk about how you got your job at Gearbox, and then whether or not you kind of always intended to work in the game industry, or that was something that was just more fortuitous.
Yes. Oh, what a fun. I love this story because it was a real hustle to get to Gearbox. And I'm so grateful every day for it because I really do have a fun time at Gearbox. It's an awesome company to work at. And I love my job. So it was in the last semester of law school. And I was really freaking out trying to figure out what to do because I had the law degree and I had the business degree. So I was like, okay, I could go either way. If I go the law degree route, I could be at a law firm or I could be in house maybe. But the options felt a little limited. Whereas on the business side, I felt like, oh, I could do anything with marketing. I could do anything with an MBA position. But then I took this video game law short course in December of 2018, and it changed everything because it opened my eyes to the fact that you can have so much passion and love for an industry and still be able to find a job in it, even with something as niche as the intersection of business and legal in the video game field, and that's in-house counsel. So I thought to myself, I really don't want to work at a law firm. I've never wanted to work at a law firm. It just wasn't my thing. No shade to law firms at all. It's just, it wasn't my vibe when I had interned at one before. So I really wanted to go in-house. I felt like that was a perfect merger of my passions. And I tried to think, okay, outside of the box, how the heck am I going to get a job like this? Because in-house counsel positions usually require lots of experience, minimum 2, but like usually anywhere from 4 to 10 I've seen. So how do I bypass that with zero experience? And so I started to think outside the box on how to network because the entertainment industry, the video game industry is the entertainment industry, which as you may or may not know is a lot of networking. It, who knows who really matters there. So I decided, all right, let me go where the people are because in Miami, where I was living at the time and going to school, there weren't many video game opportunities. So I thought, all right, what conferences, what kind of events? Game Developers Conference. I was scrolling on Twitter at 2 or 4 a.m. one of those times, one of those nights, and I found GDC when I was trying to figure out like how to get in the industry. And I saw that some lawyers were talking, and I was like, interesting. I want to go to this event, but it's $2,500 to get in, plus flight, plus hotel, plus food in San Francisco is expensive. So obviously, I figured it out. But the way to do that was on the website, there was a volunteer application. You can volunteer to be what's called a conference associate. And through that, I was able to get a free ticket and I was able to find other people to room with. And I just really had to pay the cost of the plane ticket, whatever my share of the hotel was, and, food and all that. So, being resourceful is really important because it turns out that the University of Miami Business School has some kind of scholarship for people who want to go to industry events but who can't afford it, and that was me, the broke law school student at the time. So I applied for that, got it, and it really helped out. So there at Game Developers Conference, it was a huge stroke of luck, fate, whatever you want to call it, that there was one other lawyer who was volunteering as well. And spoiler alert, he's my boss right now. So I met him there. Everybody was telling me, Vita, you got to meet this, this guy. He's a lawyer and he's at Gearbox and he's really cool. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to meet him. So I found him and then we hit it off. And then I told him, hey, if there's anything in the future, please keep me in mind. And then he was like, yeah, maybe in September we might have something. And I was like, okay. Obviously, that meant I had to pass the bar. So I hurried back home. I had to finish the semester, do all the finals and all that. And then when it came to bar prep, okay, point is that I passed the bar. And then that allowed me to reach out to him, like literally the day that I passed the bar. I was like, hey, do you have any jobs? And then he was like, yeah, forward me your resume. And then that's how I got my job at Gearbox. It was a lot of networking. And one last thing, the Video Game Bar Association is a great resource for law students and lawyers who want to be more involved with the video game industry. So I actually ended up volunteering for that VGBA event as well. There was a conference happening in May of 2019. And I said, please, I'll serve coffee. I'll literally do anything. Like, I just want to be here and meet the other lawyers. And they said, yeah, sure, you can help badge people in. I was like, okay. Turns out my boss was at that event too. And he told me later that he saw how hungry I was by seeing me volunteering for both of those events and like really going out of my way to network and meet everybody. And he could like feel the hunger. So I told him, yeah, I'm starving, bro. So please give me the job. And yeah, that's how it worked out. Like, it's a lot of hustle, it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of reaching out and getting your name out there and pretty much showing yourself as somebody who's into video games and really cares about the industry and is really passionate about it. I feel like people see that, and other video game lawyers are also equally cool. So we all love video games and all that. So we love seeing law students who are interested in that too.
Okay, so I guess the answer to the question, did you intend to work in the video game industry, is yes. So I actually I when so when did you start working at Gearbox? What year was it?
This was January of 2020.
2020. Okay, so I remember I because I followed you on Twitter. I think it was before we'd actually met.
Yeah.
And so I was here in Vancouver, and I was kind of starting a new chapter in my career. And I sort of remember you were kind of, I mean, you didn't go into the details, but you were sort of like tweeting about this stuff that you just described, kind of like in real time, and then like it sort of culminated in you getting the job at Gearbox. And I remember you had like like an announcement about that, and you were very happy. And I just thought at the time that that's it's something I want to emphasize. I mean, it's very remarkable that you kind of created, your own sort of career space in a sense, just through grit. And that's something that I think is much more. I mean, it's obviously difficult. It's obviously challenging. It's not easy, but I think it's a lot more possible than a lot of law students realize. Not necessarily to, I don't mean work in the video game industry specifically, but just sort of do something that's outside the box, right? Do something other than just, work at a law firm, just do, the sort of path of least resistance. And this is kind of a theme that I've tried to emphasize in like a number of our speakers that we've had this semester and that we'll have next semester, is people who've done things that are a little bit off the beaten path, right? And I think, the culture of law school, and I say this as a law school professor, but the culture of law school, at least here at UBC, I mean, it really kind of channels you into like a pretty narrow path, right? Like in terms of kind of career services, like you really kind of get funneled into a pretty narrow path, and everyone is sort of obsessively competing over how to kind of achieve what's a pretty narrow goal. And just my advice would be, take Vita's kind of career as an example. Like, you can always do something different, right? Like a law degree is it's a cliche, but it's true. It's a very flexible degree. Like, can you do literally anything with a law degree? I don't know about that, but you can do a lot of different things, right? You can be a lot of different types of lawyer. Like you don't have to be a lawyer, right? There's a lot of different things you can do. So anyways, very cool. And I'm really glad that that's worked out for you so well. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like to work as in-house counsel? So maybe not necessarily focused on the video game industry, but just kind of working for a corporate or working for a business in-house. Like, what do you do? Can you give us a sort of day in the life summary of your tasks and responsibilities?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So being in house is really fun. I've never had the experience of a law firm, so I cannot compare anything like that. But I do know that when I'm working at a company, everything's a fire. Everything was due yesterday and they need everything now. So it's honestly a big balancing act. It's a lot of prioritization. It's a lot of project management. If we're talking like just real quick specific to the video game industry, I would say that the most transferable skills that I get from my workload and my job as a lawyer at a video game studio is honestly being a producer at a video game studio, because a lot of the skills are so similar. It's managing multiple projects at once and having to triage issues, and there's just so much that goes into it. But let's see. So I'll wake up and then I'll probably have a couple of Teams messages from people who are asking questions about, hey, is it okay if this, one asset goes into the game because it kind of looks like this other thing that's out in the real world, but we're not really sure. So please let us know. And then I'll be like, hey, can you put in a Jira ticket or some, other form of task management software that they might have. So that'll be that. And then I'll also be getting emails from different people on the admin side. So, for example, hey, we have this contract that we have to review. We need it by tomorrow. We need it by a week. Due dates are really helpful. If it's not a contract, then I'm looking at privacy. So part of my practice, which honestly, I feel like I got Stockholm syndrome from it, because my first assignment when I got to Gearbox was having to fix up our privacy policy to make sure it was compliant with both GDPR and CCPA. So that's fun. And obviously I figured it out, but after a while, I realized that privacy is actually really important. So I've kind of been learning more and more about it, and I actually manage all of the privacy for the company now at Gearbox. So working on that as well, making sure that our privacy practices are in place. There's a lot of interplay and interaction with other departments in my job. I work with, like I said, HR as much as I work with finance, as much as I work with, I hope you don't hear that. As much as I work with
We can only see it. We can't hear it.
okay, good. As much as I work with the devs too. And honestly, that's my favorite part of the job, but I'll get into that a little later since I know we're focusing on just in-house corporate right now. So besides the contract reviews and anything privacy related, doing legal research is a part of it too. Sometimes, no, not sometimes, all the time, I'll be getting questions about every single area of law. That's one of the things about in-house counsel that is very interesting in my position specifically, because there's different kinds of in-house positions. You can be a specialist, so like let's say a privacy specialist. You could be an employment specialist. You could be a real estate specialist, litigation specialist. There's so much. But for my kind of position, which is a generalist, you deal with everything. So basically, someone will tell me, hey, I'm having this issue, and I have to listen and be like, okay, oh my God, there's a privacy issue here, and there's a possible intellectual property issue over there, and there's likely a contract issue as well. So always keeping your eyes out on like issue spotting in real time is such an important skill for in-house that I've had to develop in the 3 years or almost 4 years that I've been working at Gearbox now. Besides that, like I said, I'll have meetings, lots of meetings. They'll want to schedule a meeting to talk through, okay, the MVP of the game is ready. Well, let's talk through it, Vita, because we want to know what kind of legal issues we should be looking out for. So I literally had a call like that 2 weeks ago. Yeah, there's a lot of areas of law that I touch on as attorney in-house, but I would say that the core skills are definitely contract reviews, because I'm looking at a lot of contracts, and issue prioritization, and I guess because my practice area is more geared towards intellectual property, there's a lot of that for me as well. Just checking trademarks and copyrights and making sure that it's not infringing on anybody else's IP.
So, would it be fair to say that working in house, like you sort of have to be a jack of all trades, like you're kind of doing a lot of you're doing whatever needs to get done. And then it sounds like what I hear you saying is that if you're working in the game industry, or maybe like any other kind of media industry, you still have the same kind of jack of all trades dimension, but then also there's an emphasis on IP in particular. It sounds like that you might not have in like like a packaged goods company or something.
Right.
Okay. All right. So my next question is, I'm not totally sure if this is a question you can really answer, because as you mentioned, you haven't worked in a law firm, you've only worked in-house. But sounds like working in-house is great in your experience. What would you say, and this is like kind of a real question, because I've had students in the past couple of years who've kind of gone the same route that you have, and that they started out in-house. So not working in the game industry, but they didn't article, which is sort of like in Canada, you have to do like kind of like a 1-year internship before you can even become a real lawyer. So rather than articling at a law firm, they just went directly in-house. So that's definitely something that some of our graduates do. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the advantages and then also the disadvantages of starting your career in-house rather than working at a law firm for 4, 5, 6 years and then going in-house, which I think is a more typical path?
That's a very real question, Camden, because obviously there's a lot of advantages in my opinion. I'm definitely coming from a place of, I didn't want to work at a law firm. So for me, I put all my eggs into this in-house basket, hoping so much that it would work. And thankfully it did. It just requires such a different skill set that you might imagine. So I would say with some of the disadvantages that I've experienced having gone straight in-house as opposed to working at a law firm first and then going in-house is that I did not have the breadth of experience, subject matter experience that have been really useful when I first started. I really had to learn it on the go, on the job. And mind you, again, I started January of 2020. What happened in March of 2020? Oh my God, a whole pandemic. And so in that time, I did have a lot of time to, go on LexisNexis and look up all sorts of different subject matters that I had to look into. So I had a lot of research into maybe IP cases. I had to look into just contracts. And like, for example, sometimes I would need to make up a template on my own. One of the tasks that I was given was, hey, we want to work with influencers now, but we don't really have a specific template for influencers. But thankfully, when I was in law school, I worked on some influencer stuff through one of the clinics that we had. Was that, decent experience, yeah. But did I have a lot of like legwork to do in order to feel like I was comfortable with the template that I created and the implementation of the template? Yeah, that might have been something that had I worked at a law firm for, several months working on just influencer stuff, I could have pumped out that template way faster, for example, than had I not had the experience like I didn't when I was working in house. So that's one example where had I had more subject matter experience in multiple areas of the law, I would be able to answer questions quicker as they come. As like I said, that was not my career path. So did I make it work? Yes. Did I figure it out? Absolutely. Part of being in house to me is figuring it out. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I will have one. And that's knowing when you have to outsource to a law firm because they do have the specific specialty experience that any company needs when it comes to really nuanced things. So there have been times when in the beginning when I had to outsource privacy work because I didn't know everything there was to know about privacy, but I needed to know enough to answer the question to the devs who wanted to implement a certain feature into the game that had privacy issues with it. We didn't want to run afoul of, like I said, GDPR or CCPA. And there's also COPPA to worry about. So keeping all of those things in mind are important. But I would say that, yeah, some of those disadvantages were that I just didn't have the experience necessary to pump out answers quicker, which is something that's actually really important when you're in house. Because like I said, people are asking you questions nonstop, left and right, and you have to, know how to prioritize properly.
Okay. I did work in a law firm. I haven't worked in house, but I worked at a law firm. And I worked at a large law firm. But I think one of the things that characterizes law firms, both large and small, is that law firms are very hierarchical in structure, and you're working not necessarily in large teams, but you're definitely working in teams that have a very clear hierarchy, right? So you'll be working on a file that's managed by a partner, and then there'll be, one or more senior associates above you, and there's sort of a law firm is like a pyramid, and like every deal or every matter that you work on is sort of structured as kind of like a mini pyramid. So working in a house at what I presume to be kind of like a mid-sized company maybe, and you don't need to talk too much about like the internal details of Gearbox or anything like that, but can you just describe a little bit like what's kind of like your vertical in terms of like who you take orders from? Like, are you sort of working on your own? Is there like my impression is that when you're working in-house, that the legal teams tend to be relatively small, right? So are you pretty kind of independent in what you're doing?
It is small. And I will say that like I said, when I started working at Gearbox, it was actually just me and my boss for a while because we didn't have a paralegal for about a year and a half. So up until I think it was August of 2021, it was just me and my boss. So I was only taking orders from him, like you say. And he was my mentor. He was my mentor, my boss. He was my everything. So I learned a lot from him. And I'm obviously really grateful for everything that I've learned. But there obviously have been instances where we just have to outsource because the workload becomes a lot, especially because during December of 2020, we were going through the Embracer acquisition. So there was a lot of due diligence on top of the everyday workload that we had to deal with. What was the question again, Ken? To remind me again, just so I don't get off track.
Just kind of like sort of what's the organizational structure
Yes.
in terms of other lawyers who are either above you or beneath you? Like,
Yeah.
I guess, is there anyone beneath you? Like, are you giving anyone orders?
I wouldn't say order. Okay. I hear what you're saying. I just think Gearbox is a little different just because we are a very small legal team. So we are three lawyers and one legal assistant. The only person that I would ever give orders to, and I don't even like that verbiage because it's not. I feel like we're all a team and everybody, holds their own, is the legal assistant just because we have to get docu-signs out, we have to get contracts signed, we sometimes have to tell them to do, certain admin things. But in terms of like a lawyer beneath a lawyer, we don't have that. It's a very flat structure at Gearbox. My other colleague, Neil, he's corporate counsel as well, and we deal with the same amount of work. We just have to, we just prioritize and hand each other assignments. I have heard that at other companies, though, very big and more established companies, they have entire teams within the larger team. So like a litigation team. I know like Nintendo has that, for example. And then they'll have, an IP team, Nintendo, for example, as well, since they have to, patent and do all the copyright and trademark and stuff. So I would say Gearbox is on the smaller side of legal teams, and the work is more distributed in a flat manner as opposed to a hierarchical manner. The only boss that I take orders from is my actual boss, who's general counsel.
Interesting. Okay. So the next question I have, and I'm actually going to invite a special guest to chime in on this question if he wants. So Ryan Black is a lawyer at DLA Piper who focuses a lot on video games, right? So you can chime in on this one if you'd like to. But the question is just sort of what areas of law are most relevant to the video game industry. So for people who might, like, for example, want to have an interest in video games and maybe want to pursue that in a law firm context, like what are the kind of areas of law that you would want to go into or at least develop some kind of knowledge in?
Well, first of all, hi Ryan. I didn't know that he was in there. So hi.
Is just off camera.
Just off. It's got to be in the middle. Is there any? I mean, does Ryan want to answer first? But hi, hi Ryan. Do you want to answer first on what kind of law you've dealt with? Me first? Okay, me first. So, like I said, when I was going in, my specialty was intellectual property because it's what I cared about a lot, what I went to law school for, and what I loved. So, copyright, trademark are huge. If you are a video game company or deal with video game companies that create consoles and other handheld stuff, patent might be of interest to you on the IP field. Privacy is very big in video games. It has become so big, and it pretty much affects you if you're a developer in so many ways. Let's see. Real estate might be a part of it in a way if you are actually having a studio presence in a certain location, or if you need to, for example, build out a mocap stage off premises. So there's that. Contract law. That's like the biggest one, honestly. There are so many contracts that cross my desk on a daily basis, and it's a lot of contract review and just redlining and negotiating with the other party. So that's really important. Employment is a big one. Employment is one that is absolutely not my specialty or area of law. That's something that we typically outsource. But it's so big. Like, your devs are the lifeblood of your video game, and if you don't care for them and make sure that they're good on the employment side, you can have a lot of issues. So employment law is very important. And I'm probably missing like a really obvious one, but that's what I'll say for now.
Mind, Ryan, I actually would kind of like to. Yeah. Grab here. Here you go. I'd be curious as to what the kind of the I guess like the law firm perspective on this is.
Yeah, no, I think Vida, you got it right, and I love hearing the breadth of your answer. I mean, when I work with games companies, people think that I'm working on like Mario contracts all the time or whatever, but like I'm employing people, I'm hiring people, I'm firing people, I'm leasing property, I'm financing things, I'm doing M&A, I'm doing commercial contracts, and it's just quite interesting and in hearing you speak about it from the in-house perspective. I mean, in a lot of ways, when you service an industry as opposed to a practice area, I think firms are starting to align themselves a little bit more towards industries as opposed to practice areas, because organizing your firm in the way of like, I practice in the IP group, so therefore I have an IP group, that's a very lawyer-centric view of the world, whereas our clients don't care about that. They just want the answer to their problems in their industry. So, I think there is an effort to have law firms organize themselves a little bit more broadly, but in a lot of ways, I think that, for people like me, and I know Vida, and I know the same group of people, the same group of games lawyers, we're basically all, whether we're in-house or not, we're all kind of general counsel in a lot of ways. We just do so many different things. And I did also just want to jump back to when Vida was getting started at that VGBA thing. I'm on the board of the VGBA, and it was so awesome to watch Vida there, and I'd seen her before at GDC, and then of course since then. Did you come up to Vancouver as well? Do I remember that? Or
not yet?
Yeah. No, we had an event up in Vancouver that I think you were at least on the emails for at one point, but ultimately, like, it was really cool to see someone so hungry, like, coming out of law school and realizing that, like, there was a path, like, I'm going to make a path even if one doesn't exist. I wish I'd thought of that. I went the very much more traditional route.
No, thanks, Ryan. No, I really appreciate it. If I could say something really quick on that, you are correct. I was at the Seattle one that we had. Oh, my dog. I was at the Seattle conference the VGBA Seattle conference that happened earlier this year in May. And it was just such a special conference for me because as he said, in 2019, I was out there at the VGBA conference as an intern, just trying to meet attorneys and trying to get my foot in the door, but also just trying to network with people who are into video games too, who are doing the law thing as well. That sounded like so cool. I could not believe that there were lawyers out there who weren't, just the types that I was meeting at University of Miami. There was just a wider breadth of attorneys who are into so many of my favorite hobbies. So I thought that was really cool. And then when I was in Seattle earlier this year, I was actually giving a talk on AI at the conference, and it just felt like I came full circle because, like I said, I started off networking, trying to get my foot in the industry, and then to be speaking at one of the conferences that helped me get my job that I love so much now was just so special. And I honestly, I put all my eggs into the in-house basket. I absolutely did. And there was a lot of pressure, I have to use this law degree for something. My parents didn't come all the way from Cuba in order for me to not, do the law thing that I had set out to do. So all of it together, it ended up and culminated in where I am now. And I'm just really grateful. Next question.
I would also point out that Ryan is literally wearing a GDC hoodie. So just came prepared. I think I was at that VGBA thing that you're talking about because it was I think I had just started. It was my first or second year here, and I remember because it was a fairly big. There was people from all over the world, if I remember correctly. It was here at UBC, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm thinking of the one. What was the one that was It might have been when I first met you. There was one at UBC. Anyways, I just remember that because it was all of these. It was all these lawyers who just did video game law. Yeah. And I was I guess I failed at life. These people have cooler jobs than I do. Just kidding. I love being a professor. Okay, so my next question is, can you talk a little bit about? So this is the Center for Business Law, right? We focus on business law here, and so I'm assuming that a lot of the students in the audience are interested in business law and are interested in business. Can you talk a little bit about, and you've already talked about this a bit, but maybe just say a bit more about your MBA and how that's helped you or how much that's helped you. I mean, do you think that that's been really kind of indispensable or more just sort of an added bonus? How would you characterize that aspect of your educational experience?
Indispensable because to begin with, it gave me, like I said before, the foundation of business knowledge that I needed to understand what's even going on in-house. Because if you go straight in-house outside of law school and you have zero prior experience when it comes to, working as a lawyer out in the real world, you're going to quickly find out that it's hectic. There's a lot going on at every step of the way. And if you don't understand what the business people want, they're not going to like you. And then they're going to try and go over your head. And you definitely don't want that. One of my favorite 2 words on this planet are good faith agreements, because that's just how it is. I mean, how it is sometimes with devs is that they start working on something in good faith and they figure that they'll sign the agreement later. And the thing is, if you are not likable as an attorney, or if they feel like you're too slow, or if they feel like you're slowing down the business, they're not even going to want to come to you in the first place. And then they're going to really drag out those deals and make it good faith for a long time. So I think that there is an element of management and not networking, that's not the right word, but just communication skills and all that can really help you in terms of communicating with the business people and the devs, because lawyer to lawyer communication is one thing, but lawyer to business people communication is so different. You can't be writing long emails that they're not going to read. I promise you, they're not going to read. Even if you put a TLDR at the top, they're not going to read it. So you want to be succinct, you want to be concise, and you want to tell them what they want to hear, not tell them what they want to hear. Give them the answer that you have quickly, and don't belabor the point, because like I said, as one of our executives say, time kills deals. And I agree, it does. If you take way too long getting back to the other party on a contract, they're going to want to go with somebody else. That's just how competition is. So that communication thing was something that the MBA taught me, because I was surrounded by business people essentially. And I learned how to communicate with them and how to brevity is really important. Something else that the MBA gave me was the just strict background business intel that I needed. So I knew right off the bat, okay, we're going to have to deal with accounting and finance and tax and marketing and blah, 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 blah. Knowing how those departments work in depth because of the experience that I had in the MBA program. And I got to simulate a lot of those experiences in the MBA program, because in my finance class, we would have to get a group of people. There were a lot of group assignments in the MBA program at University of Miami. I'm so grateful for that, because group work is basically teamwork, which is basically working at a company, and especially working at a game studio. Teamwork is at the top of the line of skills that you need. So I got that experience there, and then getting that in-depth knowledge of how the different departments work because of the different classes that I took in the MBA program was so vital. Another really important class that I took that I think honestly every lawyer should take, especially if you're trying to go in-house, is negotiation. I took a negotiations class back at the MBA program, and it has proven so useful, because now inherently I knew when I went into Gearbox working that when I was redlining and negotiating with another party on a contract, I knew that we had to have a walkaway point. I knew that I couldn't just give away all my chips. I knew that I had to like retain some chips so that I could use them later, and then do the dance of like, okay, I give you this and you give me that, and then we end up in a win-win situation. And I feel like I just had that foundational knowledge of what a negotiation looks like, so that I could apply it and not let some of the perfection that dictates the lawyer career get in the way of getting the deal done. Because sometimes it's about getting the deal done and not having the absolute perfect deal for the client, who is Gearbox for me. So MBA was, oh my God, so useful, on top of it being just a really fun degree to get.
So I do not have an MBA, but I totally agree with everything you just said, especially the point about, when you're working either at a law firm or in-house, I presume, but if you're working with business people, if your clients are business people, like, it's very helpful to be able to communicate in their language and kind of speak to them, like, kind of at their level, rather than being the sort of annoying lawyer that they have to deal with, or they have to like, translate. I mean, I think that's just like really important. And it's totally true in private practice as well. It's like, if you're the lawyer who slows things down, if you're the lawyer who's difficult, like, people just aren't going to want to deal with you. And in the law firm context, that means that clients are not going to want to hire you. So it's kind of really important to develop those skills. Okay. So the next question I have is, and we've already talked about this a bit, but maybe to kind of sum it up, what specific advice would you give to students who may be interested in working in the video game industry?
Network. Network is a huge one. And I say this to everybody that asks me this question, because I really cannot harp on how important it is to have real, authentic relationships with people. Networking is not just going to an event and meeting everybody you can just to build up some kind of little like book of contacts and whatnot, just to never reach out to them again. That feels very inauthentic to me. And honestly, video game peeps can see right through that, in my opinion. I think gamers are really smart. And I think that people who work in the video game industry are just, I don't know, they're attuned to these kinds of things, just because of, I don't know, how video games are. So I find it really important to be authentic when you are communicating with others. I mean, that's an important life skill, period. I don't think it's good to be a fake or anything, but I think it's really important to build relationships that matter. And typically, if you want to get into the video game industry, you're probably liking video games. I don't think there's people out there who want to get into the video game industry who hate video games or don't care about them. I would assume that you have a passion for it. So if you want to meet people who are just as passionate about video games as you, then you need to put yourself out there. And I know that it can be hard. I'll tell you, when I was in law school, I knew that I had to network, because I just, from the very beginning, I remember in my first year of law school, like OCI were 3 letters that I had no idea what they meant. And I don't know if you guys have it over there in at UBC, but on campus interviews, right? Okay. So different law firms will come, and then you'll schedule interviews and all that. And I did not know what that was. And it was like April of my first semester, and I still didn't have a summer internship. And I was like, oh my God, I missed my chance. I, again, did the hustle methodology. You'll see this is a common theme in my life, where I just had to figure it out. And then I found an entertainment law firm that actually was the lawyer for one of the 2 Live Crew case and Gloria Stefan, I think. Yeah. big people. And then I got an internship there through emailing and through like just looking online and trying to meet people who were like, oh yeah, you should talk to X person. You never know who knows who in the entertainment industry. And I think that's why it's so important to just go out there and meet people. And it's hard. It's hard to just go to an event and be like, hi everybody, I'm a law student and you guys are all lawyers and I'm gonna have to, find things to talk about. But it is doable. Because I'll share a little story. When I was trying to do the whole GDC hustle back in 2019, I actually was speaking to a lawyer who my short course of the video game law course that I took, he introduced me to this lawyer who works at a very, very large law firm in New York. And they gave me their list of things to do if you want to get into the video game industry. It wasn't tailored for lawyers. It was tailored for game devs who wanted to work in AAA studios, but it worked all the same. And then he told me, if you can find a way to make it out to San Francisco during the GDC week for this whiskey dinner, then you can come. And it's kind of unheard of because it's a law student that's going to this all lawyer whiskey dinner. But I was like, I have to find a way to get to San Francisco. That's how the whole GDC thing also happened. And then when I got there, again, yeah, I got to the whiskey dinner. I was invited. That was like step one. Step two was actually talking to people. And like, yes, it's so nerve-wracking. I totally get it. I showed up there in a red suit, red blazer, red pants, and a leopard jacket. And I was like, I'm going to put myself out there. I have my business cards and I'm just going to meet people because chances are these people are really cool. If they're here and they're video game lawyers and they're probably into video games too. So let me use that as a common ground. And yes, that is true. Typically video game lawyers are into video games. So finding that common ground is really important. But like I said, networking is critical. And even if it's hard, you have to do it. In my opinion, you have to do it. You have to be brave and put yourself out there because the entertainment industry is just like that. It's sometimes it's who you know, and that's how you can get to where you want to go faster. So I would say networking is the number one tip. The number two tip is to put yourself out there in terms of knowing the subject matter, because if you have nothing to offer, nothing of value to offer, then it's going to be a really hard sell. You are a really hard sell if you don't really know much about video game law or have much to say about it. But one of the things that I was doing back then that I think helped me out was that I approached one of the lawyers and I told him, hey, can I write on your blog, your video game law blog? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I wrote 2 articles for him. I wrote one on FTC and the influencers and some of the issues that came about with PewDiePie. And then I also wrote about loot boxes, I believe it was loot boxes and some of the issues there, and maybe COPPA, something to do with child safety in video games and privacy. So I wrote about that, and then I was constantly tweeting about video game law stuff. I was constantly posting on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I basically, for lack of a better term, I made that my personality for a while because I really, really, really wanted this. And I was just so into it. I bought the books, I read them, I highlighted so much. I was just so in it, and I feel like that really, really helped me. It put me and my knowledge of video game law out into the eyes of all the lawyers who could be like, she might be a good hire. So I think that that's really important as well. Just like being very familiar with the subject matter so that you can have an actual conversation with people about it. Those are 2 really big pieces of advice. The third piece of advice, and this will be the last one, is honestly, take classes that are, like I said, those areas of law that video game law deals with. Those are things that in-house lawyers deal with, a lot of contract review especially. So if you take those classes in law school, it's only going to help you because you'll be developing those skills from a very early time in your law school career, and you'll be able to take all the time to develop them in the future.
Thank you very much. Ryan, do you have any thoughts, or given you've taken like some kind of a different track, you're...
I don't think it's fair if Vida can't hear me talk, so I'll just come grab the mic. Not that I want to be on the mic. So what I was going to add, and this is why I don't want to be on the mic, is that the things that Vida is talking about sound very scary, and in truth, they are nerve-wracking and difficult. And then you multiply that with the fact that, for example, myself, I am a diehard introvert, someone who really doesn't like speaking in public, someone who gets drained going to these social events and meeting people. She's been to the whiskey dinner. I've actually never even been invited to the whiskey dinner, so I don't know, Vida. We'll talk about that separately. But I guess what I'm saying is like it's not. It is scary. It is when I was dealing with some talking to my brother who you alluded to earlier, who's a psychiatrist, he says, you know, some anxiety is normal. Like, it's good to be scared of a bear that's running at you. Like, your brain acting anxiously there is actually a really good reaction. Similarly, it's good to be anxious if you're taking an important step in your life and taking steps to do that and do that sort of thing. I can only encourage you that if you do take those steps and come out of your shell a little bit and pursue areas of passion, even myself, as I now consider myself a reformed diehard introvert, just because by the nature of the job, I have had to meet and talk to a lot of people, you know, folks in the room here and stuff like that. And generally speaking, it's very doable. It doesn't seem like it. I don't think that many people are as brave as our speaker is here. I will say that. I think that the kind of the directionality of what you intentionally did is actually quite inspiring, and it's one of the reasons that I think, you know, both Camden and I were kind of drawn to your social media presence, because you were just so active in this space. And I think that it really benefited you. And I don't think that it's specific to the games industry. I think that if you're really passionate about, you know, environmental rights, you should do the same in the environmental rights organization. If you're really passionate about, you know, condo developments, there's probably loads of, you know, builders and developers associations that you can do the same thing. I just feel like it's not unique to games, what Vita did here.
It's true. And I do want to add that, like Ryan said, it is scary. I don't know if I consider myself an introvert, but I've definitely been very shy growing up. I couldn't even talk to my crush in like my whole life. Like, that wasn't like me. It was so much easier for me to type online. It was so much, I guess, I don't know, millennial, whatever you want to call it. But it was just so much easier for me to tweet, or for me to be on Instagram, or for me to be on LinkedIn or whatever, to actually walk up to somebody and talk to them at an event. But I had to force myself to do it, because I was like, you know what? In person matters a lot. Face-to-face communication matters a lot. And you leave a way more lasting impression on someone when you talk to them face-to-face than when it's just online. That's why when the goal is to speak to a lawyer, just messaging back and forth is one thing, but the next step should be to schedule a virtual call with them or something, so that you can talk face to face. They can see you. That matters a lot in my experience. And that's why I feel like you have to, at some point, just shake it off and be like, all right, for this 1 or 2 hours, I'm going to pretend that I'm the social butterfly, and I'm just going to go and talk to people. And then when it's done, I'm going to go home and eat Taco Bell and watch anime. I don't know. But for this moment, I'm going to put everything I have and just play this part. And that really helped me until the point where I actually was able to do it without having to fake it. So like, honestly, that whole fake it till you make it kind of works in this space. I faked that I was confident until I actually became confident. And it's just, I'm really grateful to be where I am, because I get it. It's hard, but it's totally doable.
Well said. Okay, so my last prepared question I have for you, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions, is what you been playing?
What have I been playing? Okay. Well, let's see. What is it? Mortal Kombat 1. I just finished that game and I absolutely loved the story mode. It felt like an entire movie was playing out before my eyes, and I actually got to play the movie. So I absolutely loved playing Mortal Kombat 1. A little bit of Overcooked, just for, I want to say stress relief, but that game is not stress relief at all. It's fun to play. Let's see what else. I pick up Stardew Valley here and there whenever I need actual
love Stardew Valley.
It's so good.
It's so relaxing. It just like reminds me of like I don't know, just like nostalgia for something I never had. Yeah.
It's the pixel art of Stardew Valley that does it for me, and the music.
It's so soothing. Oh, it's so soothing. Great therapy.
I know. And Animal Crossing was another one that when I first started, that one came out in April of 2020. And oh my God, that game was such a lifesaver, because it was just so relaxing to play on my pretend farm after a long day of work in the real world. So, yeah.
I just beat Elden Ring, which is not relaxing.
Not relaxing.
Like the least relaxing game I ever played.
Well, there's always, by the way, the backlog issue. So like, if you're asking me what I'm currently playing versus my backlog, those are two very separate questions.
No one asked, but I'm currently playing God of War Ragnarok.
Nice.
That's what I'm playing. Okay, why don't we turn it over to audience questions? Any questions in the audience? Use your desk mic there.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. That's so cool.
Perfect. Uh, this is very cool. Yeah. And it zooms in automatically. That's kind of cool. Thank you so much for speaking with us. This was really awesome. And thank you for facilitating and I guess protecting the creativity behind like Tiny Tina's and Borderlands and whatnot, because I've had a lot of fun with that.
Oh.
Two quick questions. Very generally, working in in-house counsel, what's your favorite part of your job? And what is your least favorite part of your job?
Okay, so favorite part of my job is definitely getting to work on the games. I love to work as closely as I can to the games, to the point where when I first got to Gearbox, my boss asked me like, "Hey, what do you like out of this?" And then I was like, "I like the IP stuff." And part of the IP stuff is you play Borderlands, right? And Borderlands. So you know that we're big on parody and you know that we love our jokes and our funnies and all that. So there's obviously a fine line when it comes to parody and the different things that we put in the game that we don't want to upset another party or infringe or otherwise, do something not good with other person's IP. So part of my job, and actually one of my things that I'm really proud of at Gearbox is that before I came in, we didn't really have an established what's called asset review process. Basically, it would be very ad hoc. We'd get requests. People would message me and be like, "Hey, can I put this?" And I'd be like, change it a little bit, or no, or yeah, sure. But now we have an established process for it where if they are wondering about something, then they, accumulate all of the assets that are in question and they will put in reference images for those assets and then they'll send it over and then I'll make the analysis that I do with, the parody and copyright and all that to make sure, okay, yeah, this is okay. And it's a solid process that does not slow down game dev, because the last thing that you want is for an asset to make it all the way to the end of the dev process, to the point where it's almost in content lock, to the point where, for those who don't know, it's where you can't really add or change anything else in the game because the first gold CD is going to be printed, the master. And that's why when you hear video games have gone gold, that's what that means. So at that point, you can't really change much. So if you have a legal issue at that point, it's going to be, you can't go back and just rework the whole thing because it's going to cascade and affect so many other things. So that's why getting ahead of these problems early is so important. So my favorite part are these asset reviews where I get to like literally play the game and tell them, hey, I got to play this level because I'm not sure. And then they'll let me play the level and then I'll actually be playing a game for work. So as you can tell, that's my favorite part. My least favorite part, honestly, is dealing with those really long agreements. Anything to do with real estate, I'm like, I gotta do it, but man, I need something to get me through this. So I would say, certain tasks and assignments that ironically aren't really video game related, but you still have to do it when you're working at a video game studio, are the least favorite parts of my job. Also, one of my least favorite parts is, like I said, when agreements just aren't signed before work has begun, because that just overcomplicates things for the lawyers. So that's a very lawyer pet peeve on the job.
Okay, so we actually have a question from the webinar chat. So I will read out the question, and then maybe people in the audience can think if they have any more questions. So the question, Vita, is: there's been some momentum around unionization in the games industry. Is this something that comes up in your work at all, or is it still too far out?
Yeah, so definitely heard. I've attended talks on unionization, and I'm aware that there's a sentiment that there should be unionization. At Gearbox, we haven't discussed this. It actually doesn't come up at all in my workload. We deal with other kinds of employment issues, but we haven't broached the topic of unionization yet. So I don't have any experience with unions. I've only attended a couple talks on it. So I would say that it's still too far out in terms of your question.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question about how do you work with law firm lawyers? Like earlier you mentioned that you guys outsource a lot of employment law work to law firms, but at other capacity, how do you decide if this is something the in-house counsel would take on and if this is something that should hire a law firm for? Thank you.
That's such a good question, because law firms are expensive. It is what it is. It is the way it is. I get why, but they're expensive. So how can we ensure that we're not blowing the budget, the legal budget, on law firm outsourcing when we can, do the work? I think that there is a certain element of min-maxing when it comes to that, which is really interesting to me. where I want to be able to project how long it's going to take a certain task to be completed. And that is all inclusive of researching it, doing the actual work, and delivering it to the party. I want to get an estimate of how long that's going to take before I do the calculus of, okay, will I have saved all this time that could be going to other assignments and other work if I just outsource it? And that has come into play, like I said, with employment, because that's not any of the lawyers on the Gearbox team's specialty area. And that's something that, sometimes requires very specific, minute knowledge. In the beginning, like I said, privacy was one of those where we were outsourcing to a degree because I didn't have all the knowledge, the requisite knowledge to make sure that we were compliant. So I actually relied heavily on the ESRB. And I did the calculus of, okay, a law firm will cost X to do this kind of privacy work. But and it'll take me this long, which was a long time, to do this kind of work. And that's not feasible. Where's the middle ground? The middle ground that I found was I leaned on the ESRB Privacy Certified program, who has been an absolute blessing. So helpful, so nice. Love the people there. I leaned on them for their expertise because they could help us get privacy. They could help us get privacy certified, which meant that we had to be up to date on our privacy practices. So I learned about privacy, offloaded as much as I could to the ESRB, which was cheaper than the law firm. And then with those two things combined, I found a solution that was ultimately much more cost effective than just straight up outsourcing to a law firm. I think, like, to answer your question, there has to be this kind of knowing how much it's going to cost to do a certain task in terms of not just money, but time and people, because people are money. When you think about it, their time is money. So getting a good idea of all of those things before reaching out to a law firm, and sometimes you have to, will help you decide whether you need to or not. One of the instances where we absolutely have to outsource to a law firm is for M&A, for example, because anything to do with mergers and acquisitions is a lot of lawyers, it's a lot of work, and it has to be done right. And with 2 people on the legal team during the Embracer acquisition in 2020, obviously not. Can't do it with just 2 lawyers. So we outsource the M&A stuff, and then we assist with it. We do the due diligence, and we help seek documents. But yeah, I would say that you figure out time. How much time would it take? How much would it cost in terms of people's time? And then weigh that against how much the law firm costs. And if you can do as much as you can to do it yourself in-house, do it, as long as it doesn't encroach on other tasks that you have to do. But if it ends up being that it's going to take way too long for the lawyer in-house to do it, then that's when all right, let me outsource this so that I can use this time for other things that will make the company money.
And so just to interject a bit, so you've mentioned the Embracer acquisition a couple of times. So Gearbox, what was it, last year was acquired by?
2020.
Okay. So a few years ago. And then Embracer is a video game publisher. Are they Swedish?
They're conglomerate. Yeah, they're Swedish.
Okay. So I was just talking about the due diligence process at M&A in my business organizations class a couple lectures ago. So I'm just kind of curious. So as in-house in that acquisition, then were you the one who was responsible for, example, like populating the data room and like all that kind of stuff, and like figuring out what to upload and uploading all the documents? So you're working with outside counsel to do that kind of stuff, right?
Oh yeah, and the process was basically we receive requests from the other side. It filters through the law firm of our law firm that we hired to help with the M&A. They filter the questions down to us. We have to seek the documents and or answer the questions for this. So it is a lot of documents retrieval. I learned a new phrase because I don't know why, but in Miami, we just never use this phrase, but I learned burning the midnight oil during that December of 2020 Embracer acquisition period, because it was a lot of, the beauty of in-house is that you're salaried. So like, you're not exactly billing hours, but like when it's crunch time and you're not being compensated extra for it. So I definitely burned the midnight oil for many nights during that acquisition. And that's just the name of the game. Sometimes there will be high periods of work and there will be low periods of work. But like I said, during the acquisition, it was a lot of document retrieval and figuring out questions. So one of the interesting parts, to answer your question, Camden, is that for a lot of the tech questions, I actually had to speak to a lot of the devs on the tech side in order to understand, okay, how many open source programs do we use? What privacy practices internally do we have for the Shift platform, for example, which is what you use to sign in and log in rewards and all that for our titles, such as Borderlands. There's a lot of interplay with the other departments at the company that are not strictly just, oh yeah, give me your financial records for, you know, this date to this date. No, sometimes like due diligence requires you to work with the other devs in the company to get the answers that the other side wants.
Any other audience questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, I don't see any more audience questions, and I don't think I have any more questions to ask. So why don't we end it there? Let's give a round of applause to Vida. Thank you so much. That was a really great presentation, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So yeah, and thank you everyone for coming, and thanks to you, Ryan. Okay, so I guess that's it. Thanks, Vida.
Thank you so much, Camden. And for anybody who wants to get into the video game industry, please know that you can absolutely do it. There's nothing stopping you, and you just have to put yourself out there. So good luck.